Hello everybody in the chess world. Well, today I'm here to show you basically every single line that you can play with the white pieces against the Grunfeld defense. So, okay, first, what is the Grunfeld defense? Basically, white plays d4, and after knight on f6, c4, g6, and knight on c3 main move. There are alternatives, and I will show you that, but this is basically the main idea in the Grunfeld is d5 is the answer by black, as opposed to, let us say, I don't know, a King's Indian with this, e4 and d6. So yeah, black goes for d5, contending the center immediately. So first of all, the first thing that I want to say about the Grunfeld defense is that I think that it is a great opening. I've rarely tried myself. It's too complex. There's a lot of theory, and I basically always learn it from white's point of view. But I think it's a great opening, and we've seen the Grunfeld many times. For example, in the famous Kasparov-Karpov matches. So I'm gonna first really briefly, but very briefly show you, the main things that were played, were played like in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, because there are too many YouTube videos about that. So what I want to show you mainly is, well, the most unknown, like miscellaneous, in a way, lines that white can play against that. But okay, let us go first. The main line that what we saw more often in the Grunfeld was, and the idea, for black is, white takes on d5, and after knight takes d5, we see this e4. So, black blows up this knight on c3, b takes. And you can see the main idea of the Grunfeld. White has a very big center. That's definitely an advantage. But as in many, on a King's Indian defense or in many Indian defenses, well, black relinquishes the space on the center, but they want to attack it immediately. So obviously they want to go c5 and bishop on g7 and attack this center. So just again, really briefly, what we used to see was like bishop on g7. Now there, for example, knight f3 was the main move. There exists like bishop on c4, c5, knight e2, this scheme with knight on e2 and bishop on c4 for white. Castles. But what we used to see more often was this knight on f3, c5, again, mine in the center. Okay, nowadays the most trendy line is rook b1. This is a line that I used to play like 15 years ago. But again, bishop on e3 is the other main line, is the most natural move, one that we saw again a lot of times when we saw Karpov playing Kasparov, in their matches. So for a line that queen on a5 is a line that we used to see a lot. Again, another piece joins this pins in right in here, just to undermine this d4 pawn. Of course, we can never really take on c5 with white, because that will of course allow bishop takes on c3 check and taking the rook. The ideas are there, and for example, we used to see queen d2 breaking this pin, castles rook c1, and black taking on d4, and after c takes, queen takes d2. So in here, okay, a natural knight takes d2 is a move, but I think Karpov used to use this king takes on d2 against Kasparov, and we have a similar situation as we saw in the opening. And still a big center for white. Still the idea of pressure in that center for black. Let us say knight c6 and rook d8. These are really normal main ideas for black, and this was basically what we used to see for black, and these are basically the main lines. But now we're gonna go one by one to some other lines, so let us check on that. So first of all, let us see, one of the alternatives is like the Russian variation, which is after this d5, instead of taking on d5, and possible move is knight on f3. The Russian variation was, in here, black used to play bishop on g7, and now white playing queen on b3, exerting the pressure on the d pawn. So basically, again, this is the second most known line for white against the Grunfeld. So let us say main line, pawn takes, queen takes, and we used to see stuff like castles and e4, once again really big center for white, and a6 with the idea of then playing b5 expansion on the queen side for black, winning a tempo over the queen, then allowing the development of this bishop on b7. Again, really interesting line for white. I don't care too much to show you lines in this. You can find 1,000 videos on YouTube with this line. It's a really interesting line. Before forgetting about this other line that, again, I'm not going to show you a lot about this, but it is true that one of the trendy things, yeah, you can see this in modern chess. Again, you'll see some videos on YouTube. H4, you know, whenever black plays G6 in almost no matter which opening, H4 is always possible. I mean, it's logical. There is contact on in H5. There's not too much more to be said. You know, white tries to launch a quick attack, trying to use this rook in here. And again, think. I mean, there's a lot of logic. Not only there is contact on H5, G6 is hinting that this bishop, this dark square bishop, is going to go to G7. Well, then maybe we can definitely think about short castles. So yeah, H4, H5 is, we're attacking on that side. Not my cup of tea. Usually I'm black in these kind of lines where white lashes out with an early H4. But it is a good move. Now, let us go to the main thing that I wanted to show you. These are the less known lines. So remember that on the main line, we said that in this position, you know, we saw pawn takes, knight takes, E4, knight takes, pawn takes. So again, big center for white, possibility of attacking this center for black. So it's really curious for me how, you know, in a lot of the alternative lines for white, what white is trying to do is take on D5, as in the main line, but then white wants to somehow be able to play an E4 that wins a tempo, that won't be answered by knight takes on C3 as in the main line. And I mean, we'll see white trying to do that in a lot of different ways. So one way of doing that, this is a really modern old line that I've shown in another video, is, okay, really unusual, but knight on A4. So again, you know, knight on the rim, but the idea for white is clear. We want to play an E4 that will win a tempo over a knight, as there won't be, you know, any knight takes on C3 as an answer. Okay, so again, basically the idea will be, let us follow it up with the natural bishop on G7, E4, and now let us say knight on B6, where, well, this knight in here is protected by our queen, so we don't even have to do anything about that. We can just, I don't know, play knight on F3, since this deep pawn is het. Maybe we can just go knight on F3, and this is the normal development. As I show in the other video, well, I don't trust this line anymore. I did play this, and for tournament games like 15, 20 years ago, then I discovered this immediate E5, which is, again, not the panacea for black, but okay, the line that I show you is pawn takes is more or less forced, and now black with this check starts, again, more or less forced. No, actually, definitely forced line, because after bishop d2, this beautiful knight e3 comes. I really like this move. And after pawn takes, well, the idea is bishop takes d2 check, queen takes d2, and queen h4 check, taking advantage of the fact that, well, the queen had to take the bishop and abandon the defense of this knight. So g3, queen takes, as I show in the other video. I'll leave you the links on the description, but basically queen d4, queen checks before queen b6. Okay, again, probably the computer still says white is better, but I don't like this too much for white. Still, you should consider, of course, one of the options in, you know, of these alternative lines against the Grunfeld is knight on a4. And it's good for you to know or to see that, yeah, the main idea is that we want to play an e4 that will win a tempo. There won't be any knight takes on c3. Now, I told you that there are a lot of lines with this same idea, and the next line that I'm going to show you, again, this I played in tournaments a long time ago, is the same idea. But instead of going for knight on a4, we go bishop on d2, which initially seems like a clumsy square for passive, let us say, square for a dark square bishop. But now the idea is similar. We want to play e4, and okay, yeah, it's true that black will have knight takes on c3, so e4 won't win a tempo, but we'll leave this dark square bishop on c3, opposing the black's dark square bishop. So to make it simple, let us say bishop on g7, e4, knight takes e3, bishop takes e3. Usually we see this bishop on e3. It's a good square for the bishop, but you know, I hear having the bishop opposing one of the best pieces for black, which is the prow, the bishop on g7 on the fianchetto. This is a pretty good idea. I really like this. And for example, there was this game by Dreev was playing with white against Krasenkow, and they reached this exact position. So the game followed up with castles, rook on c1. So now Krasenkow play b6 to fianchetto the bishop. It's interesting. Okay, first we'll see normal development by both sides. Knight on f3, bishop on b7, bishop on d3, knight on d7. But after castles and e6, this is a moment that I like, because here Dreev comes up with an interesting move. He just plays b4. So, the other thing that our this new bishop on c3 is doing is, controlling e5. So if e5 won't be the pawn break for black, black should search for c5. So playing b4 to prevent that, or at least make it more difficult, is an interesting move. So became just follow it up with queen on e7, queen b3. This is typical. After we played b4, we develop the queen, put her behind that pawn chain. Maybe we want to play a4 next. Rook fd8, bishop on b2, trying to use this c file, and of course hitting that c7 pawn was the continuation. This is what Dreev played. Krasenkow just played knight on f6, allowing the queen to, of course, to defend the pawn, and hitting on e4, rook fe1, very normal chess. But again, it's like black cannot play c5 as a counter play. So I don't know. It's hard to find some active moves for black. So Krasenkow went knight on e8. Interesting move. Bishop b5, but kind of an unusual move by Dreev. Finally a5. Black was searching for some activity. Well, there is some activity on a5. And I would have expected some a3 move right here. But no, Dreev actually took it. Rook takes in on a5. Bishop on c3, back hitting the rook. Okay, rook on a7. At least, Krasenkow might be thinking about this and start working on this a2 pawn. But Dreev took the opportunity to play bishop on b4, definitely preventing c5 forever and winning a tempo against the queen. This is a position of a slight advantage for white. I kind of like this. It's an interesting game. But again, the initial idea of this bishop on d2, sorry, I misfire with this. I like this idea, bishop g7, e4, and after knight takes, bishop takes on c3 with a good bishop there. Or let us say that instead of knight takes c3, black plays knight on b6. Well, then we've achieved this usual idea of we have played an e4 that wins a tempo. So, again, a pretty interesting move. I don't know. I like that. So, let us go now into a somewhat passive line for white. But you should notice. Let us go back to our main Grunfeld position. After d5. Well, there is bishop on f4, and this was tried. We saw this also in the Kasparov-Karpov matches. I think it was, Kasparov was playing the Grunfeld, and Karpov trying this bishop on f4. Yes, it's a less ambitious line. Yes, of course. But it's an interesting one. There is, for example, this game with Radjabov playing white against Timofeev. Bishop on g7 came, e3. You see, this is one of the ideas by white, just playing it more passively, just an e3 pawn, but with the bishop outside of the pawn chain on that diagonal. And yes, c5, the active move by black comes, and it feels like objectively white is pretty okay. This is still totally playable for both. So in this game, for example, we saw d takes e5, queen on a5. This typical way to try and recover that pawn. The other one will be let us say, knight on a6. Typical Grunfeld moves. Rook c1, white is saying, okay, black is going to take on c5 with the queen. Let us try to win a tempo someday because of the x-ray pressure of the rook. And, of course, it's a normal development move for the rook. Very normal. So d takes e4. Bishop takes e4, and now castles by Timofeev. Knight on f3. Finally, we see this queen takes e5, also hitting the bishop, but yeah, after bishop on b3 again, white now has a free move for this knight, as we'll have this x-ray. So yeah, Timofeev just went back with the queen. And then we saw, again, the most normal moves for both sides. Castles, knight on c6, queen on e2, and after bishop on g4, h3. Well, a position of a slight advantage for white. This is nothing more than one example on this line. But again, yeah, you should remember that you can play this bishop on f4. It's known to be one of the somewhat passive lines for white against the Grunfeld, but as I usually say, a little bit of a disencouragement for black. Black wants to go into chaos, as any King's Indian or Grunfeld player. Well, bishop on f4, you're saying like, okay, let's keep it cool and play it more passively. Now, another really similar but very interesting idea, and this again, I mean, I haven't ever played, I think, bishop on f4 on a tournament. I think I only played it in Blitz, but I did play bishop on g5. It is another alternative that to me is quite interesting because, well, in a way we're sort of going for getting a Trompowsky, if you will, against the Grunfeld. And yes, one of the ideas is, okay, we are threatening just simply to blow up this knight and then take this pawn. So yeah, I don't think we will see like the natural bishop on g7. We could do that. So okay, it is relative because, I mean, to be honest, if we were to play this, okay, if we take it with the knight, I mean, I think maybe some bishop on g7. Now black is threatening c6 to recapture here. Of course, we can play e3. I mean, there are some weird lines that black has tried with this, but it's a little bit suspicious. And of course, since this is the main idea of bishop on g5, well, of course, what we will see as a main move after that is, well, knight on e4. This is the main move, and basically what almost everyone plays against this bishop on g5. It's just as like in the Trompowsky, typical bishop g5, knight on e4. And I mean, to me, it's really funny because I remember studying this line before playing it for a tournament. And one thing that I normally do is, before checking either the computer or the theory or both, I like to just put the board, on my table and just search for the moves that I will play. And I remember that, searching for what to play for white by myself, I thought, well, I don't really like the idea of knight takes on e4. Even doubling up that pawn, I don't really like that move. I guess it's playable, but I don't like it. So I was only considering, bishop on h4 or bishop on f4. I mean, bishop on h4 is one of the main lines. But the curious thing that I wanted to show you, to tell you, is that after that I checked on the theory and I saw that c takes d5 is basically one of the main moves, and the move that I have prepared for the tournaments. And it's really curious because with the board, I did not see this move. I would have never seen that. What about the bishop? Well, h4 traps the knight. So it's always cool to see these little secrets, possible secrets, with the help of theory. So, okay, bishop on h4 is one of the main lines, and here, for example, knight takes e3, b takes e3. This taking on c3 is the main line for black, and it was like this game of Ivanchuk versus Svidler. So this pawn takes e3, just trying to record here, and Svidler play bishop on e6, a main line, just trying to hold that pawn. So queen b1 was the move by Ivanchuk, just hitting on b7, and c5, just Svidler. I mean, this, of course, all of this is a theory, but queen takes b7, and look at this, really complex lines. Okay, bishop on d5, quite obvious, we have to protect that rook. We win in the tempo, so queen b5 check, queen gets away from the attack of the bishop, but not losing a tempo. But Svidler is saying, okay, this is theory, and now my knight is out, so I have more development. So knight f3, rook b8 hitting the queen, queen on a4, and look at this, c takes d4. I mean, initially it looks great for black, in fact, after c takes d4, this is what Ivanchuk played. Well, already we see that we have a passed c pawn. Okay, that's probably a target But there are some funky tactics, because queen c8 came, and after rook on c1, e6, we finally saw bishop takes e4, so okay, no more of that passed pawn, but hey, what about rook b4, hitting both pieces? And this happened in the game, but queen a6, by Ivanchuk, just playing on the edge. I really like this, it's so like right on time not to lose a piece. Of course, okay, if queen takes queen, we just recapture with the bishop, and you cannot, queen takes e4, we take it with the rook. If bishop takes e4, we'll have queen takes queen. Everything is, or if rook takes e4, actually, let me show you all of that. It's my simple, but okay, this is nothing. You can see that. So, of course, this is nothing because you lose the queen, and not even rook takes e4, right? Because, again, we take this, and, again, it might look a little stupid, but I really like this things about theory. Rook b4 and queen a6, just right on time. So that game continued, bishop on b7, once again hitting the queen, and queen a5. It's an unclear position. I don't know, I really like this, but going back, I must admit that in this position, my main line was this c takes d5. I really like this thing, knight takes g5, and h4 trapping the knight. So, e6 is a move that exists here. It's decent. I think it's a little bit dubious. I think the main line was just to go back. So this way, we recover. Of course, we'll recover the knight, but we stop defending the d pawn. So, queen takes e5, queen hits the knight, so we'll go back and hit the queen on a5. Well, it starts to look more like a normal Grunfeld, but instead of having a pawn on e4, we have a pawn on h4, and I don't know, knight f3, bishop on g7, playing stuff like this. It's, again, going back, this, I think that the bishop on g5 line is actually really interesting as well. Finally, I want to show you what is basically my preferred system against the Grunfeld nowadays. What I actually play more often nowadays. And that actually is on the third move, not play knight on c3. I like this f3. This is called anti-Grunfeld system. Okay, so the first thing that, it might be obvious, but the thing is, black is not forced to play d5 here, right? So, of course, black will just go for a normal King's Indian. So, obviously, I do like the Samish variation against the King's Indian. In this case, I just play e4, let us say d6. Just a King's Indian, Samish variation for white. So, you have to like that. So, this is another reason why I'm showing you this line, as the last line. If you don't like the Samish system against the King's Indian, well, you just won't play this. But the idea is going to be basically the same as on the first modern lines that I show you. After the Grunfeld move d5, we'll take it. And after knight takes d5, we will play an e4 that wins a tempo or a knight, because, again, there is no knight takes on c3 possible. Okay, knight b6 is the main move. You can play knight on f6, but this is the main move, and I'll briefly show you basically some continuations, very briefly. One thing that I can tell you is normally when we see a position like this, a draw is the least likely result. We see like black crushing white, white crushing black. This is really chaotic. But for example, knight on c3, bishop on g7, as you see, it is hitting our d4 pawn. So normal development move, bishop on e3 and protecting the d pawn. Okay, castle's main line, queen d2. And after knight on c6, hitting once again the d4 pawn, long castles. Again, both sides doing the same thing. Black develops a piece and hits on d4. White answers by developing something and protecting here on d4. And here there are 1,000 moves. For example, e5 is basically a main move in which we play d5, and this I want to show you, knight on d4. So initially we're like, well, what are we doing with white here? We could play knight g2. We have to fight against this d4 knight, but knight b5 is basically the main move, the main way that white just fights against that great knight on d4. So knight takes, bishop takes. You usually see this was like nowadays a little bit old main line in here, but it illustrates quite well what happens here. Bishop on d7, so normal. Black is going like, okay, take my bishop, I want to develop and play c6 very quickly so I can, start attacking this king that went here. But white goes back, and after c6, g6, and yeah, we close up the c file, so our long king and the long castle inside is safe. And this, again, as usual, this d6 pawn is either a great pass pawn or an awful weakness that black is going to try to exploit. And of course, h4, h5 is always a plan for white, as in, well, maybe some a5, a4, a3 is always, this possible way to attack for black. But on this same line, let us go back here. I was in here. Instead of e5, there exists f5, and I remember that in one tournament game, like 10 years ago, I played h4. This was like the old main line, but it was kind of proven that black is fine here. So Carlsen against Li Chao played e5 instead, and this is, that game, you can search for that. I'll leave you some links, but that's total chaos. Knight b4, knight h3 followed, queen e8. So Li Chao was going for queen on f7 and bishop on e6, everything against this king. And Magnus went for this knight g5, h4, h5 plans. It was, really, it was like a boxing match, really chaotic. Another very curious line, and this, I actually played this line again with white in a tournament. Instead of, f5 or e5, knight on a5. And this one, I do want to just show you briefly what to do with white, because it's not so easy to see what to do. I remember the first time they played this against me was a blitz game, and I did not know this move. So initially I remember thinking, hey, black is simply threatening to put one of the knights in here, and that will force me to move the queen and then lose my good bishop, my e3 bishop. And I kind of cannot stop it. The only way to stop it will be to play some b3. But I'm already weakening the shield, the pawn shield around my king. I remember I was in that blitz game, and when they played this knight on a5, I was like, how come I never knew this move? What can I do to prevent that? And, well, finally I found out that actually b3 is the move. Yes, you just made probably the most weakening possible move, around your white king. But black lost a tempo. And look, and the funny thing is, what does black does? Does black do to continue after b3? Just going back. And then again, everything looks great for black. Black is saying, okay, yeah, I force you to play b3. Now I go back. I free my pawn to attack you with a target on b3. And this is simply part of the theory. So really, there are some things that you have to know. For example, d5, knight e5, bishop on d4 is a very solid move. So after a5, you can play a4, exchange this, again, the pride of black's position, bishop on g7. This is possible. You can also play stuff like h4, and we're going to some sort of really weird war like a5. And sometimes we see stuff even like this. It looks ridiculous. Not in this particular position, because again, one of the knights will go there and take our good bishop. But really, there are some theoretical lines where white can afford to allow a5 and then play b4. It's total chaos, really. Still, this is basically one of my favorite lines, is f3 anti-Grunfeld. As I said before, remember, you have to like the Samish variation against the King's Indian. Otherwise, you cannot play that. So, again, well, this is I think I've shown you enough. Probably go back, to see more lines in this. But I really wanted to give you like this general thing, as usual, of course, I leave markers down there so you can search for your favorite option, your favorite line from all of these things that I've just shown you, and then maybe study by yourselves, the theory and the main games that there are around your favorite line from all of this. So, well, as usual, I leave my citronetta to ask you to like, comment, share, and subscribe in case you like the video. And thanks a lot. I will see you next time.